the graphics column in PC User this month, I'm having a look at Camera Raw and how you can process Camera Raw images in Photoshop. You can do the pre-processing using the Camera Raw plugin so that you can then work on these images inside Photoshop. Without a tool like this, you would need to use your camera manufacturer's own tool for interpreting the Camera Raw data that the camera has saved. Now I've got four images here that were all taken in at a similar time on a camera that can save in Camera Raw format. So I'm going to open these. This is the Adobe Bridge. I've just got a folder called Raw Images. It could be just any regular folder except that these happen to have been saved in the RAW format. I'm going to right click these images and choose Open in Camera Raw. This dialog looks a little bit like the browse. It's the Camera Raw tool, and down the side here are the images that I selected, and over here are the controls for making adjustments to those images before we can actually open them in Photoshop. The tools here are fairly similar to Photoshop tools. There's a hand tool for moving things around, there's a zoom tool for zooming in and out, and you can also rotate the images here and crop them if you wish. By default, Camera Raw, I've just disabled that. By default, Camera Raw does an auto fix, and you can press Control U to undo or do that fix. So here I've got auto fix enabled by pressing Control U, and Photoshop has had a look at the image and done what it thinks is a pretty good fix for the image. It's not quite the way I recall it, and I know that if I choose auto here, I can build a bit more blue back into the flower, auto being the white balance setting, and that's a bit more like I remember the image was, or the flower was, when I shot it. Now these temperature controls, I can use these to tweak the setting myself. If I move the temperature to the left, I get more blue in the image. If I move it to the right, I'm going to move back into the yellows. And down here with the tint, just going to choose a sort of neutral temperature there. With tint, I'll work between green and magenta. So those are the colors that affect the white balance in the image, but I can also choose any one of these presets. Now this is a really good way of cleaning up, for example, if you didn't set the white balance control on your camera and you've shot something indoors with no flash, the tungsten will clean that up very, very well. But I know that the auto setting here is pretty good for this particular image. I can also adjust the exposure, so I can lighten or darken this image in the highlights area. I can also work on the shadows here by lightening or darkening the shadows using the shadow selector, and this brightness one controls the midtones in the image. The contrast will control the tonal range around the brightness, around the midtones that I've set, and of course saturation will deal with improving the saturation of that image, either removing some of the saturation or saturating it more strongly. Going back to the original fix that Photoshop gave me, back into my auto, and that's a pretty good fix for this particular image, so I'm happy with this. What I'm going to do now is, because I like to save these settings, I can't save my PEF file back again. You can't save back into a raw image, but you can save the settings. So I'm going to click here and choose Save Settings, and I'm going to save these settings into a file that has the image name on it. So this is imgp5952, and this is what Photoshop Camera Raw plugin is giving me by default, the same name, and it's being saved as an XMP file. And I'll just click Save. So this means that the settings that I have configured in here are now saved to a file that I could open up later on and reapply to this image if I wanted to perhaps make another, well, use the image again with those same settings, or perhaps make a variation on those settings. To reload them at a later date, I'll just take Load Settings, and then I'll navigate to the Settings folder and just click on that file and click Open, and that would reapply those settings to the image. Well, let's just see. Let's do some real damage to the image here. Let's do some really weird stuff. And let's see how, when we bring those settings back, they're brought into the image. Load Settings. Let's go and get the settings for the particular image that we're looking at. Click open, and all of a sudden those settings are applied to the original PEF Camera Raw file. Once you've made the adjustments in Camera Raw, and you've got some really good tools here for making some very fine adjustments to your image, so you'll want to start it in this dialog and make some of the major changes at this point. When you're ready to go into Photoshop, for example, I might want to apply a filter to this image to make it look like a watercolor or something. I then need to start working in Photoshop, and in that instance I'll be clicking open one image, in actual fact the image that I've currently got selected. Let's choose open one image. And in a few minutes this image is going to open inside Photoshop. It's going to be ready as any JPEG or TIFF or BMP file, PSD file would be in normal circumstances, all ready for me to start working on it in Photoshop. When I've finished, I can't save it as a PDF file. You can't write back to that Camera Raw format, so I'll just do File Save As, and at that point I'll make a determination as to what file format I'm going to save it in. JPEG, TIFF, BMP, PSD, whatever it is, that makes sense to me at the time. The other thing that you can do in Camera Raw, I'm just going to pick up these images again in Camera Raw just to show you. Let's pick up this image, and because we made some changes to it, I have an XMP file saved, so let's open it. Let's apply those changes to this image. As you can see, it's very, very simple to open your Camera Raw image back up again and load the settings back in on top of it. Now, if these were settings that I think could apply to all these other images, I'm going to choose Select All to select all the images in this group, and now I'm going to click Synchronize. And what that will do is give me the option of applying some or all of the changes that I applied to this image to all the other images that I currently have open and selected. So I'm going to apply them all. So let's click OK. And what that does is it applies this set of settings to every single other image in the group. So that if I think that this was a pretty good set of settings, set of changes to make to this image, then by selecting these other images and synchronizing it, I can put those settings back on top of those images, and there's a good chance that that will be sufficient to adjust these images as well to the kind of condition that they're ready to be worked on further in Photoshop. Photoshop 7 had a Camera Raw plugin. It's version 1, and it was an optional plugin. Photoshop CS has Camera Raw 2, and Photoshop CS2 has Camera Raw 3. You will need to check with your camera and make sure that it's compatible with Photoshop's Camera Raw tool, and then this is the kind of process that you will go through. If you shoot in Camera Raw, you have to pre-process the image before you can open and work on it in Photoshop, and this is the basics of the workflow that you'll be involved in.